welcome back. And our next speaker is going to be Johansson from Sweden, and he worked for this course. He will talk about the forgotten web. Welcome.
Wait. Hey, thank you all for coming. Welcome. Uh, if this brings you some nostalgia, then this is the presentation for you. If you have no idea what's going on, then this is also for you. Before we start, I need to say that there was a problem with my presentation. So literally the first paragraph was supposed to be about I am pretty old. Then yesterday, Matt used those exact words in his own presentation. And Matt's is sensei, so I thought that's a bit disrespectful if I say the same thing. So I changed the script, and I'm going to try to keep to saying that I'm a little bit on the older side. And by that, I don't mean that I'm old compared to the general population. Pretty old among fellow software developers. So for reference, I am twice as old now as when I had my first developer. And I'm about 3 times as old as I was when I made my first site, which I don't remember what it looked like. Probably something like this. It was back in 1996, and I chose web development because it was the most accessible. And by that, I mean it was accessible by 1996 standard. So as IDE, I used Notepad on Windows 95. DOM did not exist yet, and jQuery would be released, I think, another. It's pretty funny because today, if you come across jQuery, it's more like an archaeological curiosity that you just dug up in your there were no tutorials, no developer tools, no console log. I didn't have error messages in my browser, so what I did is I used the alert feature to open a little window. It was like my primitive version of puts debugging. I still use puts debugging in Ruby. Maybe there's a relationship there. Yeah, so I'm pretty old. I feel old. And yesterday, I was playing around with the Piccolage app as well. And by playing around, I mean that I was going a bit haywire. So be prepared for a lot of that in this presentation as well. Other than the fact that I am pretty old, I haven't told you anything about myself yet. My name is Ted. You can find me most places online as Drenmi. I was born in Sweden, but now I've spent half my life living in other places. So I currently stay in Singapore with my wife and our cat. And the cat's name is Lychee, but she actually has many names, including Tobin, Little Booger, Dobby, Monkey, and perhaps most relevant for today, Longbao, which is something that you definitely should try while you're here in Taipei. It's really a nice thing. I currently work at Discourse. We build and host open source forum software in communities, and we use Ruby on Rails. Sometimes we hire people like me, and we hire other people too. So if you're interested, you can keep an eye out for job postings on our website. But the best way to get our attention is actually to contribute to Discourse forum repository there and check it as well. Okay, back to the presentation. I tone it down a bit so we won't get too distracted. I think if this presentation had a subtitle, it would be something like a case against the modern web app, which is a term I have some gripe with because it's a term that's become very popular, but it was never really clear to me what it means. From what I gather, it tells us a lot more about how the app was built rather than any particular capabilities. which doesn't seem like a very good definition to me. It describes what something is, not what it can do. And calling it modern seems to have negative connotation for whatever is the opposite of. Anyway, this is not really a case against something. Well, I guess it is, but it's also a case for something. And that would be whatever is the opposite of modern. Maybe we call it an honest web. We'll see. So for this presentation, I have a thesis that we can summarize in 3 points. Firstly, we've been doing this for quite a while. A lot of the progress didn't happen in recent memory. So there's some sort of history around web development. Knowing history is good. I don't think that's very controversial, especially the history of our own jobs. And lastly, there is some generational gap because of this. So while I am old, people who start web development now are generally pretty young. I've definitely noticed a bit of a gap there when trying to communicate with them that requires a knowledge of the history of. And to wrap this all up, because this is a Ruby conference, I will, of course, make the case that Ruby and Rails, or any other Ruby framework, is a very good answer to the kind of states of things as they look right now. Okay, so we'll go to the history of web development, and I will break it into 3 parts. There'll be about people, about technology, and about the economics of our country. And of course, these are all interconnected, but I didn't dare to try to weave it all together. Do it at 3 separate parts. And 40 minutes is not a long amount of time. I figure if you can create a mini test in that amount of time, then I should be able to click through these slides fast enough. So I have mashed up some broad themes, personal anecdotes, and things that might hint us that Ruby and frameworks are a pretty safe bet for the foreseeable future. Last time I checked, I had accumulated 69 slides, and I hope I will make it through all of them. In fact, this morning I went through all the slides and I increased the speed of all the animations just in case. But make sure that you are well caffeinated and strapped in, because we're gonna try to go a bit fast, okay? People. Let's start with people and make it a people first presentation. In particular, let's focus on the job titles that we have had at web professionals throughout history. And we'll start with the most ancient and revered title, which was webmaster. Maybe some people in this room have worked as webmaster as well. Okay, so here is the 19-year-old me. You can tell because I still had hair at the time. I was about to start my first job at a local company that sets legal services for incorporating business. So it's not a software company. Replacing their current webmaster, who was about to go on maternity leave, and I was the only person in this company who knew anything about computers at all. My job involved maintaining and updating their company website, developing their in-house case management system, and general IT support. You could say I was roughly in charge of the content, architecture, the design, the support, which involved answering the phone, by the way, not something we do anymore. System administration, which basically meant offering servers and installing them in makeshift server room, which was basically a fire extinguisher inside, and the code. I think in hindsight, given the scope of this job and what 19 of me considered to be a fair wage, they quite a bargain when they hired me. But despite the low pay, I think it was one of the jobs that I've had. There was a wide variety of tasks to deal with, and everything I did had a real impact on real people who were working in the same office as me. And at 19, I was able to be a key player, even if it was in this small company. And I would say it was quite a formative experience. And I would summarize the experience as, let's call it honest work. So I was doing things that were valuable to people. And when you're the only person on the team, you can't laugh around or pretend to work, because then nothing will get done. Get back to that. Mats, I think, alluded to this yesterday. He talked about we must keep creating, and we'll get back to that as well. I think Mats understands history very well. He understands the economics of it. So to be a webmaster, you need to know a wide variety of skills, and you need to be willing to learn more. Because there is a lack of information on the internet, it sounds unimaginable, but that was the case. You had to figure a lot of stuff out on your own without any supervision. So you had to be quite self-motivated. But I think the key qualification is you had to be a bit of a nerd. It was a qualification I was lucky to possess. I was nerdy about computers in general, and I think development in particular. Okay. But after some years of webmasters having basic free reign over the internet, things started to change. And the demographics started to change. And a new actor showed up on the scene, which changed our titles from webmaster to web designer. A lot of the work started to flow from in-house to outside actors. And there was a massive influx of agencies at this point. And a lot of people in the agencies had a background in print and graphic design. This resulted in a shift focus towards the design in general, and maybe in particular typography at the time. So you would see many type foundries pop up designing fonts for the web. But the people coming from these agencies were quite different from the nerds. They were, let's say, a little bit more fashion-conscious people. And terms like handcrafted started to go from being just a fact of life to being a selling point. But these agency people brought a lot of good things to web development. We shifted a lot of focus towards the users and accessibility. So we would no longer tell people that they would have to use a resolution of 800, 600 pixels to view the website. We just make it work any resolution. We went from graceful degradation to progressive enhancement and to responsive design. And progressive enhancement, by the way, is the foundational principle behind Hotwire. So if you struggle to understand the philosophy behind Hotwire, it can be helpful to go and read about progressive enhancement, which is just one example of how Rails has a very strong connection to the history of web development, which I think is an asset. So we coexisted together. We decided HTML should now be semantic and describe the content. We started reading publications like A List Apart and Smashing Magazine religiously. This was also a time when a lot of famous web developers made a name for themselves. For that, there were no real like rock stars in web development. And I would say this was a kind of a golden era for web professionals. But there were troubles brewing, and I think all things eventually will come to an end. So the nerds and the hipsters were like water and oil, and started to grow apart from each other a bit, which led to the next sort of split in our job titles. And the roles of developer and designer diverged. This has been a point of contention until I joined this course, still mediating conflict between designers and developers on a regular basis. Developers would accuse designers of designing things that they build, and the designers would accuse the developers of not implementing their designs. Hopefully they are fighting about this. But the point is they were both right. It turns out the medium you're designing for actually does matter. And you can find similar relationships between, for example, architects, the kind that design buildings, and construction engineers. The engineers lack the artistic vision, and the architects don't know what's physically possible in the project. But still see that the tools designers today had some legacy from the pre-web path. If you open Figma, it still has the concept of layers, which is not like a first-hand concept in the actual medium web, but that's how they like to work. You can see how the language changed. Well, we stopped talking about things like typography and design, and started talking more about schemas and data models. Elements, which were a term from design, became components, an engineering term, and we stopped making sites and started building them. Became more engineering focused. And this will get worse as time passes, because for one thing, we'll continue to diverge, and we'll also lose our shared connection path, where we used to be one person. Not long after, some developers also came to the realization that they don't really want to do front-end stuff. They heard computers, so some people can relate. It's like I went into CS because I don't want to deal with people. I want to work with computers, so let me do the backend. And that was fine, because some of their colleagues were excited to try out new and fancy tools on the front end as well, that give them more space to do so. And so front-end developers and back-end developers parted ways. And I think this coincides with the invention of many influential front-end technologies. And I think this is where we see the biggest generational gap between developers who started before 2015 and those who started after. I was helping a team that was in really bad, it was a front-end team. It would take them weeks to do something. You should be able to do spot, and they were several months behind, and they were holding back everything. And I asked each of them individually what they thought we should do. And they all thought the solution was to add more stuff, code base, which was not the solution in my view, which would probably have dropped a bit. Meanwhile, designers had some sort of similar arrangement. Some designers gravitated more towards the UI part of things, and some designers preferred to interview users and learn more about their problems. And so designers split into UI and UX designers. And we can now see the trend here, where one person used to be able to do everything. It's all becoming very fragmented. Sysadmins were arguably always their own thing. It's more like a distillation of the nerds among the nerds. But I mean, they're just for good measure. Fragmentation is good thing. If you're old like me, when it happened to your computer, you had to run this program, which was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. The mechanical disk makes a very nice sound when it's rearranging all the data inside. When you have fragmentation, things are slow. Some of this is because of the overhead of communication and coordination. But there's more to it as well. We become more specialized, which frees up our energy to overcomplicate it. If I have a complexity budget of 5 and I have to do 5 different things, then each thing will have a complexity of 1. But then if I stop doing 4 of those things, then I can do that one thing 5 times more complex. You get the idea. It's easy then to understand why some of my younger peers think that full stack developer did not actually ever exist. They basically think it's a myth. Because they are spending 100% of their time on this very, very complicated front, and they imagine do full stack, they must spend just as much time and energy back well, rather than trying other approaches. I find developers are generally very passionate, and by that I mean we're motivated more by what we can do than what we can be. Of course, not universally true. If on LinkedIn, you will see people who are excited about being X thing, X and X everything. But even with the distinction between passionate and ambitious people, there's still a spectrum. Some developers are more interested in solving problems, so the engineering thing. Some don't care if the problems are real problems or not, so they are somewhere in the middle. Some people are mostly interested in the solution, so they are interested in the technology aspect of it. So if we zoom back in on the developers, and now with fewer things to think about, as Matt pointed out in his talk, we get bored, and we start dreaming about things that unbore us. So what might we dream about? Well, in the front end, maybe some single-page application, some module federation, something handy. Back end, I'm going to get microservices. Sysadmins, maybe cloud stuff or serverless. But the question is, are these solutions to our problem? Or are they solutions for someone else's? It could be that these are solutions that are so-called solutions to big boy problems that only experienced at mega corporations with thousands of developers and access to an endless flow of and it can be easy to confuse our own excitement about something and that thing being appropriate for what we're trying. Okay, that was the people part of it. To sort of summarize sort of dysfunction we saw here, we can say that fragmentation leads to isolation, which in turn leads to happiness. But also leads to inefficiency, because now we have the overhead of trying to understand even designers. There's complexity, and as Matt pointed out, complexity is our enemy. Not any complexity. If you're going to solve a problem, you're going to need to have a solution, and it's going to have complexity. But the sort of gratuitous complexity that we can end up with if we're not there. So complexity is our enemy because it exists upstream of unhappiness. On to technology. I would love to just make this talk about ancient technologies like image paths and Flash, or secret techniques like partner image replacement, sliding, or CSS sprite. But that wouldn't really make a presentation, so I will share a link with you at the end where you can read about all those things. So let's start with the evolution of layout in web. We started out with tables, and if you don't know this, before CSS, you could only use tables accomplish rows and columns. To achieve rounded corners, you had to create images of rounded corners in Photoshop and then do a 3 by 3 table and in the corner. After tables, we got floats, which was the first CSS-based approach. This is because the HTML was now semantic. But they were notoriously hard to learn and a lot of clear fix in your markup. And we still can do this. I don't know if you know what this layout is. This is called a Holy Grail layout. And this was not possible to do with Float. So this is very frustrating. But the history of web development is a lot about pushing constraints. So yesterday with Matt's talked about how the frustration of the constraints of BASIC made him want to design language. And there a similar thing was happening in web development. We had all the constraints we were pushing against, and we made a little bit of headway here and there. That's why you'll see a lot of websites name things CSS. Because these tricks are ways of breaking out of the constraints that we had at the today, this layout would be trivial, but it's sad that someone who does this 10-minute tutorial not appreciate many years of suffering we had when we couldn't do this. And we can do this today because we have things like Flexbox. I resisted this for a long time because I spent a lot of energy altering floats, and now it felt too easy. And we have something like CSS, which is even nice. HTML has steadily evolved. We have got stuff like center and font, which just styling, and put that in CSS. No blink tag, which is sad. Instead, we have article, which is more semantic div. We have videos because we can't use Flash video players anymore. And we have some exotic stuff like hand. We have two presentations about XML in this conference. It was interesting because there was this promise at some point that XML was going to come in and transform the entire internet, to the point where we named the browser API, including the XML HTTP request, and AJAX is probably the worst named thing in the history of web development. So it's asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And of course, the irony is not only send JSON. JavaScript. A colleague asked advice. This was back in 2014. I told him if he was serious about JavaScript, he needed to learn 3 things. Prototypal inheritance, so he can understand how things are inherited. Dynamic scoping, so he can understand what this is. And variable hoisting, so he can understand why things have a value when he didn't expect it. Pretty good advice at the time, but it didn't age all that well because these have now all been addressed in the language with the class keyword, the arrow function, and the let keyword. Maybe I was leading him in the wrong direction. But I think the point here is that web technologies are improving extremely. And that is because you have all these constraints. It was meant for the client. All the browser vendors have to go and implement it, and designed by committee. Compare that to Ruby, where we have methods that we keep moving forward and releases new version every Christmas. There's just no good case for bringing the client technologies onto the server, in my opinion. So on the topic of JavaScript, I just want to make a quick comment about TypeScript. You look at the naming right, and you're like, oh, okay, so this takes the Java out of the JavaScript. But it actually puts all the Java in there. So I think we've all been bamboozled by the naming there. So what about community? If you remember Matt yesterday, he said the Ruby community is the most precious treasure. And it explains a lot. Matt travels around the world to talk to the community and works hard out to release new features for us. We don't really see this kind of thing in JavaScript. I think someone said that the main problem with the JavaScript community isn't one. In fact, it was me who said that just now. Okay, frameworks. Gotta go fast. There's a lot to say about the merits of frameworks. If you truly need it, then use it. But I want to say a few things that I hope can explain how we end up sort of where we are. Going quite far down a single path in the solution space. And they seem very busy now solving sort of downstream problems were created by past decisions. So a lot of effort is in, but maybe there's not a lot of progress actually. And I think this is also a bit due to the lack of constraints. You can just take off in some direction, and the medium won't tell you if you're right or wrong. We're suffering a bit from the lack of history. That's what this Swedish word means. And we can see that from some old ideas re-emerging and being confused for new ideas. The most egregious one of course is server-side rendering. Some content developer realized that actually there are a lot of problems running things on the client. What if you just run it on the server? But it's taking some bad turns. So instead of reinventing full stack, there is now like front-end backend that communicate with your backend. I don't know what's going on. It's not good. I do believe, given enough time, JavaScript would eventually rediscover full stack, but I think the economy might get ahead of them. Then there was directory-based routing, also discovered by some content framework I can't name. This was really day zero of the internet. You would just upload your HTML files to a web server, and then that's your. There are some good, successful attempts to invent old ideas. Like what you see is what you get editors. Use Microsoft Front Page and Macromedia Remover, which use horribly garbled markup. But now we see some promising tools like Webflow, and the company it's been a sort of online presence for it, and this is a good. So if we look at the bottom of this trench complexity of front-end frameworks, you can see all the way to the bottom. We actually just need to send our response from the server to someone. And the simplest website you can make in 2023 is the same as 1996. You just type in an index.html page, and you put that on a server somewhere. And this might be obvious to a lot of people, but when I make this point to some people who are very entangled in the complexity of things, this really seems to blow their mind. Okay, we're done with technology, and I will just reiterate this math. Unhappiness is our enemy. Let's go into the economics of it. The internet economy, like general economy, has a linear upward trend in the long term. We have gone from companies having online presence to inventing commerce and to SaaS. And I know we're short on time, but I want to share this answer found on Stack Exchange because I was looking at the exact year SaaS was coined. And this guy named Buttons840 said, recently I heard someone say they built a SaaS application. First I thought, this guy knows something new. And I figured SaaS was some hyped enterprise framework or design pattern. But after looking up the SaaS Wikipedia page, I realized it's similar in meaning to web. What is the origin of the phrase SaaS? I thought it was just brilliant. I don't know if he is making a gag or not, but I love this question. And then he said, wow, so many new phrases to add to my resume. I will be very popular with our departments. Okay, very cool. Economy, number go up. I like to pronounce SaaS as source. That's where all the money is currently. But more importantly than the long-term trend of increased economic growth, the economy also has cycles. And this slide is stolen from a DHH keynote presentation at Wales World. You can think of the blue line here as the cost of money, roughly. And when money is cheap, speculation goes wild, cash is flowing, and there are corporations everywhere trying to get their grab bag of cash. These corporations are the ones that have the big boy problems talked about. They hire thousands of people and they end up with hyper specialized teams, and they invent solutions sometimes explicitly meant to deal with those problems. If we take, for example, microservices, it's basically there because we have other teams that don't talk to each other. So why don't we have the architecture be so people don't need to talk? That doesn't mean that we should stop talking to each other and build microservices in our. But of course, this is not the first time we had a bubble around web industry, web technology. This is maybe the third one. And the first and most well-known one was, of course, the .com bubble, which sounds obvious to me. You know what? That was 23 years ago, the year 2000, and most people who start web development now, they weren't even born in 2000. Hard to believe, but it's the case. But we can hardly expect them to remember the .com boom when they weren't born. So all they have experienced is this deranged market condition where money is free, so you don't have to have an honest product, you don't have to do honest work. And that's been going on for a surprisingly long time. But it doesn't seem like it's going to continue anymore. So eventually the bubble bursts and money has value again, which means that to get the money, you must provide some value back. That's sort of how it when it's healthy. Lead to layoffs in these mega corporations. Suddenly you get an email that thanks you for your time there, you can no longer access the internet. And I think it's sad. A lot of people get hired into bubbles without knowing it. That's the only thing. And you hear things like, oh, you're going to change jobs in this job market. And it's like, yeah, this is the normal job market now that we've gone back to. It's the one we had that was slightly crazy. So when there are layoffs, you want to be the webmaster, to be a key player. So for thought experiment, let's talk about Python law. He basically says the square root of the people does half the work. What does that mean? 10-person team. You have 3 players, they do half the work. Okay, safe. What about the other people? Okay, on average, they do 7% of the work each. That's not too far off from the 10% expect if everyone does exactly the same amount of work. Let's call these serious contributors to the company. It's pretty hard to get someone off here because you're going to find someone, everything that person knows, and be productive. Now take a 1,000-person team. The gray people on average do 0.05% of the work. These mega corporations, it's kind of a no-brainer to just fire 100 people. And I see this comment like, oh, they fire people, even the good ones. It's like, yeah, unless you're in this 3% of like the real top performers, they can't, it's impossible to doing what in And some of these people will come to harsh realizations. Their job role only exists in a zero interest rate environment. If you are a tech recruiter or growth hacker or something, maybe your job role will disappear until the next bubble happens. Or maybe you're a developer, but you can't live up to the expectations of productivity in a healthy economy. It's very sad. It's going, but if you understand the history of bubbles and you want to leverage that the next time it happens, all the power to you. I just think it's very sad that people don't know that it's happening and they get confused and they get scared. Okay, same problem. Cheap money leads to giant companies, leads to fragmentation and so on. Ruby and Rails provide an antidote, I think. If you're a Rails developer, there's a much higher probability that you're a key player or a serious contributor in your company. You're probably doing lots of honest work because you can't hide behind a lot of the gratuitous complexity. And you're probably in a pretty great company, like a company that is focused on solving real problems, call them honest companies with honest products. And if you're doing honest work and you're creating real value, you're good at it, you don't have to worry about the market. Like, never worried about getting a job since I started doing web development, especially since I started doing Ruby. But the recession stayed bad. Okay, so what shall we do? I haven't been too gloomy, but I have tried to draw some of the dysfunctions in industry at large so that we can present some alternative ones. For anything like me, who has been safe and just serving things from afar, then you might think, oh, I don't need to do anything. I'm fine because I'm doing honest work while but there's a lot of people who have been stuck in this deranged world that we have been in. So I think there are some things we should do. We should try to defragment web development, maybe teach full stack more, promote it more, introduce people to Ruby. It's easy to dunk on what's going on in the other places, but we also focus on, hey, we're pretty happy over here. Tell your stories. We're pretty bad at telling stories, but like old man, telling stories is how we teach history, and that history is important. But also rest assured that Ruby on Rails remembers Mats and DHH. They understand history because they were there. They understand the people and the technology. They understand how economic influence, and many of the lessons are baked into the languages and work. But others reply with them and with us, that sort of tribal knowledge in the community. So we should try to almost there. That was supposed to be the last slide, but then I wanted to respond to something Matt said. He said more history of burden, which was bad for me. I'm giving a presentation about history, important. This is true if you're a language designer, because you can't read all the language. But it also means more legacy, which in developer terms has gotten a bad rap. We use it to describe the mistakes that we made last week. But it also means that we gain more wisdom over time. With Ruby, it means we gain more friendship and make more memories as well. It turns 30 this year. Rails turns 20, and I've been doing Ruby on Rails full time for 10 years. I tried other languages and frameworks, but after all this time, I still wake up every morning and I choose to do that's what makes me happy. And I think it's pretty crazy to think that all of that is because one person decided at some point that he's gonna make other people happy, and he wouldn't give up. And I know he's pretty humble about it, and he would say, "Oh, actually, it's not about me, but I am very, very grateful to Mets for changing my life in ways that I know were possible." The end. Here is the link if you want to read more about the crazy technology we were using. That's my guy named Jane Hoffman.
Thank you so much for the sharing. We are happy to see that. Because of the time, so we don't have a Q&A part. If you have any question, can go to see him and ask him in person in our tea time break. So right now we are gonna take we have like 25 minutes for tea time break, and then we're gonna keep going with our next speaker. Thank you so much.